Well, let's just go ahead and get started a little bit. So I've got a bunch of stuff here, but to start with, we want to open up our clay, and I have just some little basic clay working tools here and some things for creating texture, and also some little straw pieces that we're going to use to make some holes. So I'm going to get out a little bit of clay, and this is the plus clay, and I'm going to be using the terracotta color. It's kind of my favorite, but I use the black a lot too, and I use the white too, but I like the terracotta the best. And I reseal my clay with a piece of packing tape. I find that that really works the best as far as keeping your clay good for a long time. So get a little out here. Now we're going to be working with a little bit more just at one time than you're going to need for just one pendant, because it's really challenging to gauge enough clay just for one thing. So we're going to actually probably make at least two or three pendants with just this small amount of clay here. So I've got that out. I'm going to reseal this. Okay, so this stuff is really easy to work with. It's really soft. I've noticed sometimes it comes a little less soft. If that's the case, you can just add a little bit of water to it, kind of work it in, and it'll rejuvenate itself a little bit. You just don't want to add too much. So I'm going to roll it into a ball, flatten it just a little bit. Now I'm going to start rolling it. And I'm going to roll it until it's about maybe 1/8 of an inch thick. And I usually turn it over every couple of rolls so that it doesn't get too stuck to my work surface. So that's a pretty good, nice thickness there. Now to give our clay some texture, some interest, you can use a lot of things. One of my favorite things to use, and this is, Karen, what I used for the pendant that you have, is this sticky back fun foam, or I guess it's called craft foam too. You can cut it into shapes and then stick it onto a piece of cardboard or cardstock. This is actually a piece of orange juice carton. You can make any shapes you want, and then you'll get either a positive or negative shape depending on which way you go. So this was literally the piece that I used for Karen's pendant, and I used just a portion of it here. So because this is a negative space, we're going to have a positive raised space on our clay if we use this. And if I use this, then we're going to have a depressed area. And that's what I'm going to be showing you today, because it's going to be a little bit nicer area for us to add some embossing powder to when we're done. So I'm just going to set this here, and don't worry about the placement too much. Press it down a little bit, and then I take my roller and I just roll over it really lightly. That way I'm kind of just flattening out the back a little bit, and it doesn't have my fingerprints on it. And then it just peels off. Now, obviously this whole shape is not going to be our pendant, so we need to cut it down. And there's a variety of ways we can do that. We can use these little, these are actually like cookie cutters. You can use like a little pie cutter. This comes in a set with a bunch of shapes. It's used for pie crust. And I think I'll use that to start with. So I'm just going to cut out a portion of this, like so. And then I'm going to just set this aside while I roll my clay out again and do a few more of these. So this clay, this really goes a long way, and it's kind of a great idea to do as gifts for people. If you have a lot of people on your gift list that you like making gifts for, this is a great idea. It's probably pretty good there. And maybe this time, well, let's just try this one so I can show you the difference. So I'm going to set it here, roll it out just a little bit. And now see, I have a raised surface, something different. And this time I'll use a circle cutter. I'll do this medium one. And I want this section here. Okay, now let's do a couple more. And I'll try a rubber stamp this time. I like this stamp. It's got just a variety of textures on it, so kind of I can really use this in just about any area of the stamp. And I think I'm gonna, I always like this one up here. Now this time, when I cut it out, I'm gonna actually cut a square or rectangle shape. Yeah, isn't that cool? I love that texture. This is a Tim Holtz stamp. So now I'm going to take just this little, this is a clay cutter tool, but you could use like a plastic knife or a butter knife would be fine. And I'm just going to cut a rectangular shape, and I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm not going to be too concerned about how square or perfect it is. Let's see. I did get that a little off, but that's okay. Like that. And that's good. I could probably get one more out of this for sure, but I'll just set that aside for now. So now what we want to do is a couple things. We want to put some holes in here so we can hang it, and we also want to smooth out the rough edges that come from using a cutter, basically. And we're going to do that with just a little bit of water. But first I'm going to cut the holes. So I've got a couple different sizes of straws here. This is just a regular drinking straw. And if you're going to use leather cord or a thicker type of cord and you don't want to use a jump ring, this is a good size to use. If you're going to be using cotton, you know, something more this weight, or hemp, then I really recommend these little coffee stir straws because they're just the right size. So let's do some of both of that too. So I'm kind of going about a 1/16 of an inch from the edge, so pretty close. Twist it. That removes the clay nicely. So that's a pretty big hole, but that's going to be great for some leather cord. And for these guys, I just need to decide. I think I want the top here.
Tonia, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Does the clay shrink at all when it dries?
The clay does shrink a tiny bit. I don't have an exact percentage for you, but it does shrink. I'd say total maybe about a 1/16 of an inch on something this size, you know.
Okay, so doing a bigger
that's
hole.
even a little high. It does shrink, but not a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, oh, and some other things that we can do too is, you know, we don't have to just stick with the texture that we created from the stamp. We can use other tools like a needle tool. You could use actually like an embroidery needle, and we can add a little bit of detail that way too, which is fun. It kind of just, I like that because it puts your own hand into it, your own marks. And, you know, it's kind of fun. It's like doodling, something like that. It's kind of cool. So now the last thing that we want to do before we let these dry is we just want to smooth it a little bit. So I just dip my finger in a bowl of water here, and I'm mostly concerned about the back. That's pretty much where it's, see, I got these little like scraggly edges. I can use my finger and just smooth those out. And if you don't do this, you can sand this when it's dry, and I will show you that too. But this is an easier way to go. If you can get as much of the sharpness out when the clay's still wet, that's good. And if you see any cracks, I don't mind a certain amount of cracks in this clay. I think it just kind of adds to the earthen look of it. But if there's something that really bothers you, sometimes you can just work it out with a little bit of water too, and some pressure. But like I said, for the most part, I don't worry about that. So that one looks pretty good. And I would just do that to these two. Usually if I cut a rectangle like this, I'll also, oops, there we go, that rounded it. I kind of round the corners a little bit so that it's just a little softer of a design. So, and then this stuff takes, it depends on the size. These are small pieces. So these would be dry just on their own, probably in about 6 hours, especially here in the desert. If it's a little bit more humid, it might take a little longer, but I usually let my stuff sit overnight and I come back and work with it the next day. And also I have put this in a craft toaster oven before too, for on about like 200 degrees for about 20 minutes. And that seems to do the trick too. Okay, now the clay that gets all over your fingers, it's very easy to get off with water. I usually have a paper towel, which I do here. And it also, the clay comes off just with water off your work surface too. So it's really easy to clean up. It's not like some clays where you have to worry. I mean, even if this completely dries, I can go back later with water and wash it off. It's really great. Okay, so because of the magic of Hollywood, I of course have some of these that are already dry to show you what the next steps are. Let's see. Some of this out of my way. Okay, so I've got a variety here. Oh, and I didn't show this, but this was a bead that I made just from cutting out one of those textures and rolling them up, kind of similar to your paper beads. I just used a little bit of water at the end to smooth the seam part down. And that's something that would work as a diffuser too. If you wanted to do just this, you know, you could have just the bead as the focal point, or you could add it along with other beads to the actual pendant. So I have, let's see, before I start decorating this, I just want to show you some other finished things. So here is a pendant that I made with the black clay, and I used a rubber stamp here for the texture. And that copper color that you see is this, it's metallic wax, it's gilding wax, and it's really fun to put on here, and I'll show that. And then this is, of course, a knotted necklace, but we are not going to do that, but I am going to show you how to attach the pendant. Here's some earrings, actually, so you could make a few pieces of this and just connect them with jump rings. And then if you don't want to do a pendant, you can also do a bracelet, and I'm going to kind of show that too after the necklace. You just want to put 2 holes in it, obviously, instead of 1. And as I leave it to dry, I kind of will set it on my roller. I won't completely round it, but just give it a little bit of roundness, because then it's a little bit more comfortable to wear. And yeah, that's pretty good. Okay. Any questions before I move on? Okay.
Everything sounds good. I love the bead, the rolled bead.
The bead, yeah, I figured you would. I saw that when I was looking through some stuff yesterday, and I thought, oh, I should include that.
I just can imagine put a big chunk, about 3 or 4 of them, and then maybe some accent beads, and then just load it with oil and just take a nice whiff on your wrist.
Yeah, that would be cool. And that would work, you know, for a bracelet too.
Yeah. Oh, yummy. Thank you.
All right, so here are some finished ones that are dry. This guy came from this hand-carved stamp, and that I used here too with that gilding wax. It shows up obviously a little bit easier on the black clay than it does on here, but I've done it on the terracotta too. I don't know if you can you see that? It's got a little bit of a sheen to it. And then all of these I used with that, that stamp that we just used, this one. So you can see I got a pretty good variety out of just that one stamp. So it's really, possibilities are endless. Oh, and I also have these two too.
I have another question.
For a bracelet.
I'm
Yeah.
excited. I'm excited. So do you put the texture in that while it's wet or after? The little, you know, with the dots that you did with the flower that you gave me?
Like these little dots and on yours? I do that when it's wet. Yep, I do that with this guy.
Okay, alrighty.
A toothpick works too. I've used that. And you know what's also cute are those flat toothpicks. They actually make a line that looks like stitching. That's really kind of cute too.
I have a question
Yeah,
about the wax. What was that again that you used?
it's called gilding wax. This is just one particular kind, but there's a lot of brands that make this, and you can order this online easily.
Something
It's
called
like-
Rub and Buff too. You can get Rub and
It's
Buff.
like Rub and Buff. Yeah, it was originally created for picture frames, for picture framing, but it's used for all kinds of stuff now. And why don't I just go ahead and demo that now while I've got it here. So I'm going to show that on, I think I'm going to put that on this bracelet piece here. And to use that, I usually have a paper towel handy. And this stuff goes a long way. Like, this is a lifetime supply of wax here. Like, seriously. And it keeps for a long time too. So I'm not even going to actually squeeze any out. I'm just going to set my finger on the end of it here and pick up a tiny bit. Then I'm going to actually kind of dab some of the excess off. And then I'm just going to lightly go over my piece, and look at that. Just puts a little bit of that metallic color on the raised areas. It's really pretty on the black clay. Cool, huh? So that's the gilding wax. And then another way to embellish the clay is with the embossing powders. And I recommended these iced enamel embossing powders because they're a jewelry grade powder. So you could use regular rubber stamping embossing powder. I just don't know that it would hold up as well with wearing it, but you could certainly try it. But this is what I'm going to be using. And I'm going to show that, I think, on this guy here. So for that, we need the embossing powder. We need a glue pen so that we can easily control where we're going to put the glue. And then we need, of course, a heat gun, which I have over here. And I like to use a piece of scrap paper. It's like using, if you've not used embossing powder before, it's like using glitter. So I usually work on a piece of paper. And I've got a little mixture. This is a turquoise color. And you can see it's got little stuff in it. Those are little flecks of like copper and just brown. It kind of gives the whole thing an aged, distressed look. That's kind of the Susan Leonard Casimir style. And what I have here is a little mixture of the turquoise, and it also comes in a green color. And I like the color that this creates with those together. So that's what this is. Okay, so we take our quickie glue pen, and sometimes you have to get the roller started a little bit. And then it just easily draws right on the clay. It's so cool. And you're just gonna kind of fill in whatever areas you want the powder to be. And don't worry about the glue drying before you're ready to put the powder on. It remains tacky. That's the nature of this quickie glue pen. So you can take your time. And with these depressions in the clay, it's really easy to, just run my pen along there without worrying about how straight my line is or anything like that.
I love the quickie glue because you can use it for gluing papers too. It's just a really nice little pen.
It's a nice pen. I ordered these in like the packs of 6 or whatever it is because I use them a lot. I use them with metallic leaf too, a lot.
Beautiful.
Okay, so I'm gonna just sprinkle some on. I use these tiny little spoons for this. And just make sure it's in there. Tap off the excess. Okay. And if it's anywhere that you don't want it, I usually will just take like a little paintbrush and I'll brush off if it's in any place that I don't want it, or you know, you can blow on it, of course. And let's just funnel this back in here. Okay. Now let me grab the heat gun, and I also usually work on a tile, a ceramic tile. You just don't want to heat on your cutting mat because you'll melt it. So let me move that out of the way. And okay, and this takes, it just depends on how hot the gun is and how hot, you know, if you've been doing a few, when it's starting from cold, it's probably going to take maybe up to a minute to actually melt this. But what I'm going to be looking for is the whole thing is going to kind of start to just look like it's bubbling just a little bit. That's when I know it's done. So see if you'll be able to see it or not. There it goes.
What kind of heat gun do you have, Tonia? If you can hear me. It's probably too noisy for her.
Okay.
Tonia, what kind of heat gun are you using?
I am using a Wagner. This is actually like it's from the hardware store. They sell these in the paint department. It's like a paint drying gun.
Nice.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so then this is going to be a little hot for, you know, a few seconds. I let it start to cool down, and then when it's almost cool, if I have, let's see, yeah, I can pick it up. If I have any areas that look like they're too big of a bubble, I will just usually take a toothpick or my finger if I'm, you know, pretty convinced it's not going to come back up, and I can just sort of tap some of that texture back down if I want to. But isn't that a cool texture? It's kind of like an enamel. I really like it. And, you know, it comes in a variety of colors. Here's kind of a bronze one that I did yesterday. Kind of looks like a hammered texture, I think. Pretty cool. So those are a couple of ways you can add some color to your clay. Any questions on that?
That's beautiful.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried using, and I don't know if this would work, but glass frit? You know, crushed glass?
Oh, you know, like enamel, like Thompson's enamel, or is there more like a craft grade of that? But I'm not.
Well, it's literally, I mean, I don't know if enamel is glass, but it's literally just crushed glass, and you can get it in different coarseness. You can get it fine, medium, and coarse.
Yeah. Enamel is crushed glass, and
okay.
And actually, I have not tried it, but Activa products, the ones that make this clay, claim that this clay can actually be fired. So you could, you know, melt that crushed glass, the enamel powder, with a torch, because a heat gun I don't think would be hot enough to do it. Unless, like I said, maybe there is more of a craft grade out there that works with the heat gun that I'm not familiar with. But you could either fire this in a kiln with some of that powder, or you could use a torch on it, absolutely. And they claimed, you know, that it's fine. So that's, which I think is just really cool about this clay. I think that's amazing that it's both air dry and it's fireable. So
Can you paint it after it's dry?
you can paint it after it's dry, absolutely. Yep. I haven't done a whole lot of that, but I've done that on a few pieces, and I've done that actually in some other classes, which I was going to mention at the end as other things you can do with this clay. But absolutely, yeah, you can paint it with acrylic paint. I haven't used, I've used paint pens, acrylic paint pens. You can decorate it with that. But I haven't used any other paint that's not acrylic. So I'm not sure, but I imagine. Okay. Okay, so I guess then the last thing that we want to talk about is how we're actually going to be able to wear this. So I want to show you how just a really simple solution for using the cord. This is hemp cord here, and we're gonna tie it on with this type of knot at the top, and then we're gonna create an adjustable knot for the ends. So I like my necklaces to be long enough to easily put over my head without totally messing up my hair. So I end up with these strings that end up being kind of long in the back, so that my necklace is short, the short enough length that I want it. But if you don't want to do an adjustable knot, you could always use, jewelry finishing findings, to create a clasp for the end of it, of course. But since we don't all have access to all that stuff all the time, I wanted to show you the most basic way. So that's what I'm going to do. So let's see. So I have a few options here. I thought this is cotton cord, and it comes in this thickness. This is like, I guess, 2 millimeter, and then this is 1 millimeter. And then there's leather cord, which I've also used. That's what I used on this bracelet here. Let's see that better. And then you can, of course, use hemp cord, nylon cord, lots of options. So actually, I think I'm going to show you the knot with this hemp cord, because size-wise, it's kind of in between those two. So for me, I start out with a length of cord that's about just under a yard, maybe about 34 inches. And I use the wingspan measurement. Okay. And then I also have just some, what are these, number 6? Yeah, number 6 beads. And I'm just going to use a couple of those. And those are for the ends. And then you'll also need, to create the knot part, an additional 7 inches seems to be about the magic number for that. You're not wasting a lot, but you've got enough to work with that you're not struggling. Okay, so let's see. First thing is I'm going to thread 1 bead on, and then I'm going to tie a knot at the end. And I'm just going to cinch it as close to the end as I can. Okay, there's the bead. Then I'm going to tie a second knot to keep that bead in place there. And again, just use my thumbnail to cinch that up tight. Good. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other end. Okay. So now let's make the knot. So I'm just going to overlap my ends, and it doesn't matter where. I could overlap this much if I wanted. They just need to be overlapped in, you know, opposite directions. I'm going to hold that. And then I'm going to take that extra length that I had, and I'm going to make a loop in it with a short tail and a long tail. And I'm going to hold this all together. And I'm going to take the long tail, and I'm going to wrap it around 3 times. And it's kind of a little awkward getting started until you've done it a few times, but just try and kind of hold those loops with your other finger. Okay, so there's three loops. Now I'm going to take the end that I was just looping with, and I'm going to pass them back through the 3 loops and the loop, the big loop at the end. Okay. And then I'm going to pull those 2 ends together. You know, it looks like I lost one of the loops there, but that's okay. It'll still work if there's, you know, even if there's just a couple there. And you're going to tighten it, and it should be pretty snug, but you want to still be able to move this necklace cord through it. So kind of test it out. And then we're going to take the tail ends of the knot cord, and we're going to put a knot cinched up to the end, to the knot. And we're going to trim it. And I just trim it flush to the knot because I'm going to put some glue on the end of it. I'm going to do the same thing with this tail. Trim that. And then I have some super glue here, and I'm just going to put some super glue on it on the end. There's also jewelry glue you can use. I've got some of that here too. I use the super glue because I'm impatient and it dries faster than the jewelry glue. Just want to be really careful to not get the glue on either strand of the necklace. Just keep it to the knot itself. Just a tiny dot. And other side. The key is to not let it get on your finger, right? You'll know what super glue and stuck fingers is like. And then I'm going to set that aside. But I'm actually not going to set it aside because I'm going to show you how to put this on your necklace. But that's what I would recommend. Set it aside for a few minutes. So now I'm just going to find the center of the strand and create a loop, and I'm going to push it through the pendant from the front to the back. And I should have made this hole a little bigger. Oh, that's something else too. Once this clay is dry, you can still drill it. If you've got a hand drill or a power drill with a small bit, it drills really easily without completely falling apart. It's very cool. Okay, so there's my loop, and then I'm just going to, of course, pull the rest of the necklace through it. I'm sure you've all made this knot before. And we're good to go. So that's the pendant. Any questions on that? Pretty easy, right? Now, if you want to do a bracelet, like this one here, I've used a leather cord, and I did the exact same thing. You just need probably a little bit larger beads to get it over the end of the bracelet. And the way that I figured out the length for this is you want to make sure that when you get it on, you can get it over your hand, right? So that's the minimum size. And to figure that size, I just measured from the center of my palm to where the pendant would be. So I just put this on my hand and I measured from the center around here. Now I want to mention one thing about length, and that is how much length the knots actually take up. So it's kind of surprising, but for leather cord, each one, at least this 2 millimeter cord, each one of these knots takes an inch of leather. So you want to figure out your measurement, and then you want to add, you know, say 1, 2, 3 knots. So 3 inches to your length that's needed for each half of your bracelet. And if, you know, the same is true for that, that thinner, the hemp cord, for it, each knot takes a 1/2 inch. So these tiny knots here each take a 1/2 inch of cord. So something to keep in mind when you're guesstimating your length. Oh, and something else really cool that I just learned. So you know how when we are taking our cord off of a piece of cardboard, it has these little kinks in it? I learned that if you take, and maybe you knew this already, but it was news to me and I was thrilled to learn it. If you spray it with just a little bit of water and then work it in between your fingers, and my fingers are dirty with clay, so now I'm gonna have a little clay dust on my leather, it gets the kink out. I was just like so happy to learn that. And this works on any of the cord. I've tried it on the hemp and the cotton and the leather. So
That's a great tip. I love that.
yeah, because I just, you know, before I would like leave my, I'd like try and weight them down, you know, leave them hanging for a while. And this just works like right away. So there you go. I think that's about it. Is there anything else that I could show you again, or any other questions that you have?
I just
Nope.
want to start making stuff.
Yeah, I know. That's the only hard part, is waiting for the clay to dry, right? That's the hardest part. Yeah, is waiting for the clay to dry. But that's why it's nice to do, you know, multiple things at one time too, so that you can keep going with it, and you know, you could come back and when I'm really doing a lot with clay, I will do that. I'll do a little bit each day, and then I've got a little bit more to work with each day. So I just wanted to mention again a couple things that I have done with the clay, because you know, you've got this package now and you've maybe only used this little bit. You want to do a lot of pendants, but maybe not, you know, 400 or however many you get out of that bag. So there are some other things you can do with it. And I actually offer courses on these that you can find on my website. So this is a little journal that I have as a course.
Be still my heart. Be still my heart.
Journals of Joy are what these are, and I show you how to do the Coptic binding. And we actually make some forms to get this, you know, nice detail in our covers. So that's one thing you can do. And you know, you were talking about paint. So this is the terracotta clay. I've used this embossing powder that I just showed you, and I've used also acrylic paint here to give it this, you know, the shading texture in here. Same thing with the back. And then again, this is the white clay that's got some paint applied to it. And again, the embossing powder. So that's one thing you can do. Then I have another course. It's actually my most popular course, and it's called Moon Bowls. And I show you how to make these pretty little bowls using acrylic paint and varnish and some metallic leaf. And those are really, really fun and make great gifts as well. And then most recently, I put together a course that uses clay and fabric, or just fabric, but these are, this is the bowl of mending course, and I used clay for the bottoms of these bowls too. So lots of other things you can do with this clay besides the diffuser pendants.
Those are beautiful, Tonia. What kind of paper is used in those books?
Oh, good question. So in these books here, this is hemp paper, and this is specifically made by, have you heard of the brand Hemp Teak?
Yes.
Actually, the same ones that made this cord here. They sell this hemp paper, and it's kind of got that aged look because it's actually hand dyed. They make it in little, what do you call when you hand make paper, the the little decal. It's like comes in sheets that are they're about 5 by 7, or I think they have a larger size available too. So you can find that on the Hemteak website. It comes in white, which I've also used, and then I just love this aged, the aged paper with the decal edges on it. Cool, right?
It's beautiful.